Welcome to this virtual event hosted by the ARMA San Diego chapter. I'm Arlette Holmes, Vice Chair for the San Diego chapter, and I'm excited to introduce you to today's speaker about the ethical imperatives behind records and information governance. Steve Weissman is known as the InfoGov guy and is founder and CEO at Harley Group. His goals are the same as everybody here, which is basically reducing compliance risks and unlocking business opportunities. Steve is a long-time contributor to associations such as AIM and ARMA, and he's a talented public speaker. Most recently, he was speaking at InfoNext and other ARMA chapters, so we are very lucky to have him here. One more thing you should know about Steve, he's passionate about baseball, and maybe horticulture too. Just so you know, this event is being recorded, and both recording and slides will be made available to attendees. So please welcome Steve Weissman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Arlette. The horticultural reference harkens to a conversation we had before we started the call, just for the purpose of the recording. Please don't call me with your gardening questions, because I have the original black thumb. Subject you have chosen for today is ethical imperatives behind records and information governance. And I first posted about this, could be a couple of years ago now. And it was really interesting, the responses that I got. Everybody agrees that the ethics are important. A lot of the conversations in recent times are centered on artificial intelligence. And it dawned on me at that point that there's a certain ethical code we should be following just in terms of the way we deal with our information, regardless of how that gets intensified when we start talking about tools like AI. So I gleaned a lot of really interesting perspectives from people. I am really keen to get yours. So I want to say, let's have a discussion, especially since the slides will be available after this is over with. I already know what the slides are going to say, and you'll see them whether we complete the whole deck or not today. So if and as you have thoughts, I would love for you just to chime in. Arlette, I think you possibly can see the chat. Like I said, I have all these windows open. I'm not sure I'll see it. You can use the electronic hand raise or just shout at me. And, I'm really keen, probably more keen to learn from all of you than you are to learn from me.
And I do see the chat.
Okay, good. Thank you. So you'll be my conscience here. I was going to say, I don't know if she's the devil or the angel on my shoulder. We'll have to figure that out as we go. Okay, let me switch modes here. With any sort of luck, you can see me in the bottom of my little window. Hello. I had to do it because it's fun to do. So let's talk about this. Oh, okay. First slide is about me. You already know about me. Arlette just told you we have a website. That's all I got to say about that, as they say in Forrest Gump. The conversation begins with, what's the point of what we're trying to do? And most often when I talk to people, clients or otherwise, about, what keeps them up at night, the hard things, how can we help you do it better, that kind of thing, it boils down to a handful of important but sort of generic, impersonal things. We want to make sure that we get the right facts in front, and that are stored in the right places, in front of the right people at the right time. That's a sing-song. Certainly I didn't make that up, but really, if you had to make just a single handful of bullets about what's the point of records and information governance, it's those things. And to do a good job of that, we really have to pay attention to the information itself, of course, and the information technology that we're using to take proper care. It's both sides of that equation. There is nobody watching this who doesn't have both information and technology. They could be complex repositories or SharePoint. It could be a file share on a network. We all use email. I know because when you registered for this, you put in an email. So we have no excuses. And a lot of times we don't even deal with email because it's so hard to deal with as an information repository. And yet it is probably one of the largest and most important repositories we have because we live and die on the strength of what comes through our inboxes. So we all are in the same boat. We're all trying to do information right. And there isn't anybody who doesn't need to take better care of all of it. And I put it that way in not to be snarky or judgy, but in the mode of a doctor I had once. I just switched practices. It's the first time I saw him, and he said, "You need to take this medicine. Everybody has reflux." I said, "Well, I don't have reflux." He said, "Trust me, you do. Everybody has it. I have it. You have it. Your wife has it. Everybody has it." It's like, okay, fine. So I say this, we all have this issue in the same mode. We may not notice it, but it's there. We get so used to dealing with things working the way they work that we pay no heed to it. It's just always how it's been. So, and we're getting our stuff done. What's the problem? So, even in those cases, I'm not saying we're doing it wrong or not doing it at all, but there's always ways to do it better. And it doesn't have to be a huge lift with major time and money commitments. We can do a lot for relatively little. And I think it's important to view even the discussion of ethics in that same mode. So I work with organizations from the very small. So, Paulina, you know, I'm guessing, I haven't been there, but I'm guessing yours is not a major metropolis. But I do work with town governments of smaller sizes because there's always something that can be done. And I always encourage people, do what you can. Even if you don't do it all, can always make it a little bit better. Now, having said that, a lot of times we're so focused on the right facts, the right place, the right people, the right time that we forget about the impacts on the human beings that we're serving. So this is sort of a longer-winded setup into the discussion of ethics. Because at the end of the day, the point of what we're doing with our information isn't right time, right place, as much as it is to better serve people. And there are real world consequences to the decisions we make about how we do information. There's a certain gravitas we have to gain if we don't have it and maintain so that we can be sure we're doing right by people in our companies, citizens and residents of our towns and counties. Um, we have to keep their information private and secure. We have to make sure it's accurate. We have to make sure we get rid of it when the time comes. We also have to make sure that in doing so, we're taking care of the people, not only whose information it is we're governing, but those are affected by the practices that we deploy. So I'm kind of rattling on, and I'm glancing over here where I can see your faces. And again, I encourage you to jump in, but until somebody kicks me in the shins, and I'm looking at you, Meg, I'll just keep going. Meg and I know each other a long time, so I am wearing shin guards. So, okay, here's an example. Let's suppose the guy in this picture right here, let's say he's a surgeon. He's on his way to perform an operation, and he looks, and it's cool because where he lives, they have an online transit schedule showing on time and arrival times for the bus and the trolleys and all that kind of stuff. And that's very cool. But what he doesn't know is there's been a glitch, and the data he's looking at is from yesterday. So in a certain way, that information is It isn't wrong, but it is. It's not really helping him. It's correct in that it reflected the truth, but not today's truth. And he doesn't know that. So he gets on this trolley and he doesn't know it's running late. So he has to wait for it. He arrives late. And because things are bollocksed up, he's like really late. And meanwhile, the patient is waiting for the surgery. And and probably not an emergency or somebody else would have filled in. But there is this ripple effect that because of this glitch in the way that information was governed and thus presented, there were some real human impacts. And if I'm the patient in the bed waiting for this guy, I'm freaking out because nobody wants to have surgery and you kind of mentally get prepared for having it at a certain time. And now you're just waiting and you haven't eaten and all the things. So I'm not meaning to belabor this particular point, but this kind of a scenario to me is the bridge between doing information right and doing it ethically. Does that make sense? I'm looking at the heads. Everybody's nodding or perhaps nodding off. I'm not sure. Notting Hill. There's my London reference. Okay. So let's talk about this a bit. So I thought I knew what it meant to be ethical, and I talked to a lot of people, and they're ethical people, and we all have kind of the same idea, but we had a hard time really nailing it down. And I thought, oh, you know who's nailed this kind of thing down? Lots of people, like the dictionary. So just as examples, I looked up some things and combined them on this slide. Where it gets squishy is because it has the word moral. Ethics, the discipline concerned with what's morally good and bad and morally right or wrong. And of course, what is morality? And that's way beyond the scope of this call. But I think we can agree on a certain few components, which is the need to be compassionate, the need to be unbiased and fair and transparent. So people know where we're coming from, what's shaping our thinking, why we're doing what we're doing, and keeping these human impacts top of mind. That as much time as we spend wrestling with the efficacy and accuracy of the information we're dealing with, we're only really doing it to help people do something, make a business decision, get a fishing license. I mean, a billion things, right? So like better customer service because we can give them a customer facing portal and give them immediate access to solid information. I get this a lot in the governmental circles when it comes to freedom of information, open government kinds of things. But that's true for any kind of self-service. And you get into disconnects between what's available through the if you will, the portal or my account and what it says in the chat bot. That's becoming increasingly a thing where the chat bot turns out in a lot of cases is provided by a third party and they don't really even know what the company's policy is. And there's increasingly a disconnect between how soon you have to cancel something before you get charged. The company says one thing, the chatbot says another. That's not helpful. And which one is right? So as the keepers of that information flame, we have to be sure that we're covering these bases. So we don't want somebody to lose out on an opportunity because the information was mismatched or have it cost them more money. Something as simple as I need to go on vacation. I want to submit my form and it goes awry. Or you get an automated reply saying, cool, you're good, but your boss never knows about it and wonders where the heck you are. So again, I'm almost overselling it, but I'm doing it for a purpose because we want to treat people right. And at the end of the day, when I think of ethics, it boils down to that. So I think some of you have possibly seen me use this slide before, but it's the perfect example. And it's a real life example that I've redacted the heck out of because it's intensely personal. And I even took the logo off of the healthcare company. But a letter was sent that says, "Dear person, your program with us ends on a certain date. We want to let you know that you're still in our healthcare service, umbrella, but this particular program is ended." Fine, important, highly personal, need to know. I don't know. I hope you can see it well enough, because my question is, what's wrong with what you see? Is it too small? Because I'll just flip to the answer if you can't read it.
No,
Anybody want to
No,
take
that's fine. That's fine.
the letter is dated the 10th of May after the person's coverage ends.
Yes, sir. That's it. Now, here's the problem. If we just focus on the information governance, there's nothing wrong with this, because the date of the program end is correct. The date the letter was produced is correct. The patient's name, address, account number, it's all correct. They did the notification through mail, that's correct. And yet the whole thing is wrong, because this person was bounced from this program 3 days before the letter was even printed. Is that ethical? Again, I keep looking over at your faces for those of you wondering why you're seeing the side of my head, which I'm told is better than the front. You see what I'm talking about? No, I don't know. Do you find that as ethical, unethical? Dictionary definition aside, to me, this is highly problematic, and the perfect example of why we need to be thinking a step beyond the information and our practices and our technologies, because this all worked.
So, Steve, I don't know if I consider it unethical. I consider it bad business practices. And if it was intentional or intentionally done incorrectly on a systematic level, then maybe, yeah, it's unethical. If it's a one-off error, then I would say there's a problem here, not necessarily unethical, and there are consequences that need to happen as a result of this error.
I think that's a very fair point. I can tell you that as a practice, this is what happens over here. I don't think it was intentional, to your point. And I think perhaps that's an important distinction. Although I also will say, if I'm this patient, I don't care. I got screwed.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Amitabh, you're actually using the hand raise thing. How polite of you. Go ahead.
No, I think Paul raises a good point. One-off. I usually find the one-off things to be a little bit quirky, because the old clockwork theory, if it's happening one-off, maybe that's the one which got caught and somebody complained about it, but maybe other letters may have gone out. I think the real question here is, because most of these things are now, automatically generated through, some kind of a RPA thing, and nowadays, they're probably using RAG or whatever. But the question here is that, the process of generating this communication from the source data, there's a timing question, and there's probably some legislation that says you need to give them 30-day notice, first of all, right? So they're probably a violation of that anyways, 30, 60, whatever. So they're already non-compliant, number one, right?
Yeah.
Because you obviously don't tell somebody 2 days in advance, hey, your coverage is going to be ending. Hopefully the third day they don't have some kind of major, surgery happening or something like that, right? So there are a number of layers of issues here. Least of all, it's problematic, but the problem, I think the issue which I see is, and it's probably not ethical per se, but I think there is a problem in that if you're using automated tools, how do you avoid this type of faux pas happening? So the governance is that compliance regulations require 60-day notice. Why is the letter sent out in this case 3 days after the fact? Like, what process didn't run properly. I think that's where, as an organization, you need to be looking at your compliance procedures to ensure you have proper governance of, in this case, providing the insurance coverage that the person is expecting. And of course, that can then get into other litigation if a whole bunch of people say, hey, well, we all got our letters 3 days after, now there is a class action lawsuit, especially if somehow the coverage ended up with some kind of unfortunate outcomes for the people that lost coverage.
Yes.
That's the risk I see, really.
Yes, there's risk everywhere you look. And I guess one of my takeaways from this brief conversation here already is definitional. Is this ethical, not ethical? And I agree with you, Paul, if this was an intentional, if it was set up intentionally to be this way, that would be an ethical issue. What I can tell you is this particular organization, this is their standard practice. And I think they do it. No one will have said this, per se, but it is all about trying to keep the number of patients they have enrolled at any given time lower. And it's really quite a terrible thing.
Well, then that is an ethical question.
Well, it is. But I think, go ahead.
Around.
Yeah. No, it's good. And, now you also know I mean it when I say I'm really keen to have the conversation. So I think if I were to reconstruct this deck, I might even start with look at all of this through the eyes of the people who are affected by your information and your practices, whether it's unethical, quote unquote, or not. The impact is the same. I think it's an important distinction that you both raised.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, what do they say? It may be a distinction without a difference, because the human impact of something like this is pretty dire. So thank you both for that. I think that's great. I have a couple of other similar sorts of examples that I think are going to fall under that same discussion we just had. I love this one. There was a woman whose neighborhood fell between two 911 service areas, which made it virtually impossible for them to get services. And she used FOIA repeatedly for several years. She spent $5,000 of her own money to try to fix this, and finally did, and in fact was recognized by one of the communities for having done so. So with our the conversation we just had in mind, this may not be an unethical situation, but for the people who couldn't get the 911 service areas, they had a problem, and a system that supposedly was put in place to help them didn't work. So I think my overarching point still applies, which is we have to do these things in a way that really serve the people we're supposed to be serving, and not forget about that one additional step beyond the information itself. Interesting. Okay. I like, cool. There's a third one for my friends in the oil and gas community, drawn on a real world story where, if you're at the wellhead and something goes wrong and there's a safety issue, somebody gets hurt, you have to be sure it's set up in a way where the information that they need to help the person and to avoid a very long and expensive shutdown of the well, you need to have information on hand that's going to let you resolve these issues right away. Like right away. The guy's bleeding, you got to staunch the blood flow, that kind of thing. So again, ethical, not ethical, it depends on, I guess, the intention of the company and whether they're still relying on shipping 3-ring binders full of paper instructions, or they have things available on the phone. Out there in the boonies, one of the first things they do is set up cell service or satellite phone service, because they're so far out in the boonies, there's no infrastructure at all. So this kind of thinking, put the human first, I think I'm thinking back to some engagements I had that involved that kind of thing. It's like, yes, make sure that that's there. It's more than just trying to get the building materials to build the, build the well and start the drilling. All right. And so you've reshaped my whole thinking. Yes, Arlette. You're on mute, by the way. Oh, here we go.
Right. Well, I just wanted to after listening to Paul and to Amitabh about and you about the response. The thing is with ethics is that it's about the right thing to do. So whether it's in the policy or whether it's in the workflow or not, the ethical point is the moral point, right? And that's where it's really hard to figure out whether it's actually an ethic point or a definition point or workflow point. So everybody can look at these examples and see it from a different perspective, basically.
Yeah, but it's good. I mean, one of the things I'm always looking for the common thread to build out from, and this is one of those issues. Like I said, I first posed it publicly a while ago, and these are the kinds of discussions that have ensued. I mean, I went as far as to suggest, do we need some kind of an information code of ethics? And I got, again, fascinating conversation, and I think this is one of the places the conversation got hung up. What would such a thing consist of? So for me, like this discussion right here is quite brilliant because it's giving me not only different perspectives but different vocabularies to use in trying to figure out what makes for ethical governance and how much of it has to do with intention versus outcome. So I can't imagine that there's a policy by an oil company that says they can go back to the hut and look at the manual to figure out what to do because we don't care if somebody gets hurt. It wouldn't be good business either with workman's comp and all that kind of stuff. So it wouldn't be intentional, but yet there are scenarios where it happens anyway. Ethical or unethical, I think my recommendation is look at it the other way around from the person who's being affected. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, and to your point, I'm not sure that there is any overarching ethics standard. And certainly each company creates its own ethics environment and or an ethics document. But there are guidelines such as the U.S. Department of Justice evaluation of corporate compliance programs and compliance programs that are set up by companies, and then institutional standards. I mean, probably NIST even has something about the ethics of information governance and access. Principles of least privilege, things of that nature,
Yep.
combining privacy and information management together.
Yes, I did look at a bunch of those. I did look at some corporate examples. I haven't done so recently, so I'll take that as an action item. And I'll invite everybody, certainly you guys on the call and those of you watching the recording, to circle back if you're inclined with me and let me know your thoughts. For the most part, I found documents that talk about ethics, either they're referencing other documents like from NIST or someplace, and or they talk about it in terms of how to conduct business, but it's all about their own practices and nothing about the people being affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I noodled on it for a while, and it's like I never came up with language I liked about how to introduce that reverse view into the conversation. But to me, that my finding of that quick overview of places like NIST and elsewhere it's like, okay, they are really good starting points, but there's still another step to be taken somehow.
You, Steve, it's interesting because in the IGP, to be recertified, you have to have 2 credits
Right.
of ethics
Yeah.
credits, right? And that's always one of the hardest one to obtain because you actually do not quite know, okay, what relates to ethics that could use it as an ethics credit. So that's all speaking to your point, right? It's very definitional, huh?
Yeah, and I think this counts because to me anyway, I mean, like I'm not on the board, behind IGP, but having done a lot of behind the scenes certification work, to me a requirement like that is all about spending time with the issue, which we certainly are. Amitabh, I see your hand raised again. I just want to say to people, this is awesome. And if it's working for you, I'm thrilled because at this point, I'm like, I don't know if I'll get through the slides, but that's okay with me as long as it's okay with you. And I'm looking at Pauline because you've been suspiciously quiet so far. So I
Maybe we
want
can
to,
have maybe we can have a part two, huh?
well,
And
I'd be okay. I'm happy to do that too. Go ahead, Amitabh.
Yeah, so a couple things. So I think the angle about governance is really good because when I work with clients, and I have chats with Steve, here and there all the time, and one thing which I kind of speak to clients about is governance is kind of like doing the right thing even when no one's looking, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah. Yep.
you should do A, B, and C. Go, well, it's a Friday afternoon. I'm a little bit lazy, tired. I won't do C, and guess what? Not doing C results in something bad the following week. All right, so now you didn't follow the governance, and therefore something happened. Now, was that an ethical decision that you didn't follow it? So those become really, hard questions. However, one could say that if the intent of governance is to minimize risk and low risk and some of those things, improve, you know, performance and so on and so forth, but it's also to be compliant, then sometimes being not ethical can also be illegal. For example,
Mhm.
the example of the, wellhead and the safety manuals are not there, right? Well, why aren't they? Well, the procedures say that the manual should be within 10 feet. Okay, so the question really I think comes is when is governance a way to help people think about things that they're potentially not going to do, but should do to be kind of on the ethical side? So in other words, if you do the governance steps that are indicated by your governance framework, um, then is it passing the smell test? Have you done everything reasonably? So everything was done that's reasonably expected of an individual to be compliant with things. But I think today the ethical angle is really looked, I think, through two lenses. One is from the side from the part of compliance as I think Paul kind of indicated, and the other thing is of course not being compliant. It implies then there's potentially some form of litigation. So now you have the whole litigation area. So while ethics may be a bit of a gray zone because of my perception of what's a smell test versus yours is different. Of course, what we consider today being ethical maybe wasn't the case 30 or 40 years ago. But I think for us today, sitting here, especially with AI, that's the point I'm coming to. Ethics is being amplified significantly by the AI tools available and the governance around AI tools so that information is used properly for the benefit of the organization, but also in terms of compliance. I think that is a struggle that we're all facing. Have you done things that are reasonably expected by you or by the organization to manage your information and data in an ethical manner? Therefore, you have, passed that smell test. So I actually worked with Patricia and Norman. We actually printed out a paper that was published in the Records Management Journal about digital ethics and AI. And these are some of the things that we were kind of dealing with. Is that how do you use AI in an ethical manner, but yet not get burdened with overly complex processes, and so it was an attempt to kind of explain the digital ethic dilemma for people in the information governance, area of practice.
That paper is
So,
that? Yeah.
so I got I got my 2 credits, by the way.
Yeah. No. Okay. Good. That's a credit to you. Is that paper available?
Yeah. I can go and search it up. Give me a few minutes.
Yeah. In fact, if it's okay with you, send me a link and I'll put it in recording notes so people.
Yeah.
can
Sure.
click on it.
Sure.
No,
I
that's
think if you read it, I think if you read the paper, you might be able to get your two credits also.
that I don't know, but
Let me just
it's okay
look
with
here.
me. All right.
Search for it.
Amazing. So I'm looking over here now at the rest of my slide deck.
Sorry for
Oh
going
no!
off it.
Again, that's why I wanted to check. Those of you watching the recording, we could have been here.
Part of the discussion.
Yeah, and yes, we can certainly do a follow-up. I do think it's an important, part of the balancing act too. I mean, I'm a words guy, so I spent probably too much
Yeah,
time.
just put the link in the thing.
All right, good, thank you. Let me take a moment just to open it so I can download it and put it in the notes. I'm a words guy, so I spend too much time on definitions, I think. There is a certain point at which it becomes unimportant. So when you're talking in terms of the smell test, doing the right thing, whether or not somebody is looking, I think that's a good place to draw that line. And I would consider, if you're a person or an organization that adheres to that philosophy, that makes you ethical. And with all the other distinctions still to come, maybe they're important, maybe they're not, maybe they get fine-tuned organization by organization. To your point too, it's changed over time in some part because the tools have changed. And I was thinking of AI when you said it. It existed, but not in its almost commodity sense the way it does today. I mean, you can start using these tools for free, and there's a million of them. You don't even have to give them your email address. You just start putting queries in to see what you get back. I don't recommend it for business use. But you couldn't do that 5 years ago, even. So it speaks to better tools for finding information, more complicated tools to do different kinds of analyses, more information in general. I think will continue to drive this notion, and I'll continue to call it ethics for lack of a better word. I think it just puts it that much more to the fore, and something to keep in mind. And I would also encourage organizations to make it front of mind, top of mind. It's about, on the receiving end of the information that's in our care, it's about generating trust. That the people that we're serving, they have trust in us to apply the proper protections, but also trust in the information that we're telling them and the guidance that we're giving them. So again, I go back to the disconnect between the chatbots and the website information. If, as a customer or a user or a town resident, that's not helping. So yeah, I love being able to pay my utility bills and my tax, all that stuff online. But there's nothing that makes me feel good about it quite like having a screen that says, "Thank you for your payment. Here are all the details." Instead of just some generic, "Thanks for visiting our website." It's not wrong, but there's another step. Anyway, I'm on my soapbox, but that's partly why I'm here, I think, right? All right, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I had another example, but I'm not even going to talk about it, except to say we have information to govern in a lot of different places we don't maybe even consciously think about. So rather than asking my quiz question, this is a picture of the yard. I had an industrial contractor client, and I took a picture walking into the building one day over the fence. And this is all the stuff that you see in the yard. And what I realized is every one of these pieces of equipment has yards and yards of information about it. Where did it come from? Who's the supplier? What's the part number? There's an associated invoice. There's a check we use to pay it. There are, in this case, weld inspections to be made. Go ahead to the next slide. There's a lot of stuff here. So I centered on the weld inspections for some of these pipes that are here that are going to get buried underground to transport water or electricity or gas or whatever they're building that week. You want to know that the reports are current, that the images are findable and they're available and they're in focus, because a lot of these inspections get done. They put a robot with a camera in and let it go through the pipe. Can we tell anything? What about the inspector? We have all kinds of things about the inspector. The credentials. Do they have the right credentials? Are they current? Have we verified their currency, or are we taking the guy's word for it? So there's an overlay of accountability, which you talked about in terms of, I think it was you. You talked about there could be litigation if some of these things go too far. It applies to discovery, and you notice I left the E off discovery because this applies to E stuff as much as it applies to paper stuff. Hard and soft copies, structured and unstructured data. We're talking about the need to do the care and feeding of information across the board and do it right. So, tons of paper in boxes in the rooms or in the mountain or wherever they are. But we have all these electronic repositories and we have the shared drives and we have our email. The stuff is everywhere, and getting a handle on it is, of course, the first step. So there's multiple tracks to follow, most of which, I'll dare say all of which, are going to be familiar to you guys because you do this for a living already. So if I did this right, okay, I did. Look at that. So just like you would with anything else, when you convene your steering committee, I call it a Congress, and usually I mean it with a little c, a lowercase c, because it's a meeting of the minds, because we need the perspectives from all over the organization. Whether you're large or small, whether you have dedicated people or not, there are plenty of small towns I've worked with where the same person does IT and manages the records and answers the phone because they're small. The idea is to get all the perspectives represented, which, if we're doing it right, we're doing anyway as part of our governance activities. But I have yet to walk into a circumstance where this notion of ethics, and I'm using air quotes because of our conversation, but doing right by the people that we're serving is there until I introduce it. Nobody's against it. And when I mention it, people are like, oh, well, yeah, of course. But to me, having all these people representing all these different perspectives, having them all acknowledge in writing, in the charter or in the policies, that this is a key value, I think is very important. So it's not really even that much of an add to the things that we're already doing when we do our information better. It's a line item. So, a big part of that, I touched on this, is bridging all the silos and not worrying so much about the distinction between records and documents and data and content and knowledge. And those of you who know me know I just call it stuff. It's all about the stuff, because it is, and we have it all over the place, and there's lots of duplicates. We want to make sure we understand the provenance and pedigree of where this information came from, and how do we know it's right and accurate and up to date and blah, blah, blah. But to do so, as these areas come together with that human element in mind, maybe we don't care because we know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. It works fine. Well, it only works fine because we're used to it. We figured out the workarounds. But if we're trying to in the case, I go back to the freedom of information example, in the public sector, if we're going to try to be more open, we're going to put more of this on the constituents, and they care if they get duplicate hits, especially if they don't say the same thing. So I think, again, it's worth spending a moment to codify this as something that's important, because again, it's all about engendering and building and maintaining their trust. So I just mentioned this. But you look at the existing policies and processes. Are they inward facing exclusively, or do they also have an outward facing component? It may not even be that they have to be rewritten. It may be just we need a new line, or we need to reconfigure or reorchestrate the policies that we have, as we often have to do when there is a new technology. I mean, in the early days of social media, there was discussion, and it started with, do we need separate policies for Facebook and for Twitter and for Google Hangouts and all the things? And that's the way many companies started. And it's like, no, you need a policy for social media regardless. So maybe we need to rethink, instead of adding a line to every single policy we have where we think it's relevant, maybe we need a more ethics oriented policy to serve as an overarching one for all the other. I don't know. I'm throwing out possible approaches, and every place may want to do it differently. But it's a question worth asking, especially in light of the advent of AI and other tools, because we're having the same discussions about AI. Do we need an AI policy specifically? Well, did we need a new policy when it came to email or workflow? Well, email, yes. Workflow, I don't know if I've seen anything specific to that. They're all just new tools, but they each bring with them new opportunities, but also new risks. And some part of that risk, increasingly, I believe, is this notion of behaving ethically, taking care of the people whose information we're taking care of. Somewhere in here, I'm going to find a new bumper sticker, so bear with me. So, I tried to think of an example here, what that next step might look like. So, just to start on the right for a change. So often when it comes to security and privacy and all those things, there's this balancing act between being more transparent versus locking it down so the bad guys can't get at it and things can't leak out. It's this, to me, it's like a slider you have to set, and you find a comfort point somewhere in between, because if you lock it down too tight, and I have plenty of clients who have this, people who are supposed to have access to the repository don't. They should, but they don't. So what do they end up doing? They end up putting stuff in a file share so they can do their jobs. So you want to loosen it up, but if you loosen it up too much, then too many. So, but the discussion is more than technologically, where do we set those thresholds? But what does it mean in general for the people who are using the systems and for people whose information is stored in those systems? So it's beyond just the technology and internal policy point. What's the impact on the human at the end of the chain? So figuring out, how often do we update something? Well, we're smaller, we don't have a big pipe, but we have a bunch of offices. So we have to do things piecemeal or a couple times a week versus every day or what have you. We have to, manage the load on the system and the bandwidth and all the things. Okay, but what does that mean if, like, you're a healthcare organization in a more rural area? Does that affect your ability to actually provide good patient care, or is there a lag? So then I think of the person fighting the 911 battle. It's the same sort of thing. The systems are there, but there are gaps. And if you happen to be, so, we talk about it even in other terms, like your luggage gets lost. And the thing is, considering the amount of flights and things and the volume of baggage, the percentage of baggage that actually gets lost is really small. But you know what? If your bag is one of those small percentages, you don't care. Because for you, it's 100% this trip. So things happen. I'm not suggesting we're looking for perfection. What I'm suggesting is we need to spend more time being conscious of the ramifications. Now, we talked about AI already, but I'm still going to show this slide because I just thought it was brilliant. Because in the original setup for the slide deck, it's like we got this far into it before we talked about AI. Except thanks to Amitabh, he ruined my flow completely. And I do mean thanks to Amitabh. Because it's all the same things. I'm going to skip through this. We've talked about AI a lot, and the difference between AI and machine learning, which in terms of the ethical discussion is less important, but I never miss an opportunity to say, don't sweat the AI stuff in terms of technology as a threat and all that stuff, because I've yet to see a true AI application in the information space. A lot of good stuff and a lot of stuff I'm coming to call things that are AI-ish. But the more we utilize something like that and the more we give over to the machine to handle our information, the more we have to be aware of this ethics-ish conversation. I want to, again, I'm skipping ahead because we're really at time, but I wanted to share this because I thought it was important. And in fact, it was Norm Meridian. He was at InfoNext and he had a great session. He wrote a book about ethics. I mean, what could be more perfect, right? But he made this distinction, which I thought was really important and really good. AI ethics that relate to the machine use of information and IG ethics that relate to the human use of information. I haven't had a chance even still to think through that fully, but it struck me as a really important difference in terms of how we think about our practices versus the tools that we use, and make sure that they're all pointed in the same direction, which is the people, to protect and serve, like it said, like it still says on the Los Angeles Police Department cars. So anyway, I finished with a rush. It was a great conversation. I'm happy to stay on if you guys want to talk for a few more minutes.
So
And if
before
not, we can talk on the internet or something.
I do want to thank you, Steve, for actually making this very interactive and for bringing up a lot of good points that others in the conversation have brought up and responded to as well. Just for the purpose of ARMA, for the good of the community, I just wanted to bring up that we have the ARMA California Summer Conference going on July 24th and 25th in Irvine, in California. You can look up the details for it's on the Greater Los Angeles, so ARMA GLA website, and register for it there. It's a great opportunity to actually connect with people live. It's a smaller conference, but for those of you who don't have maybe the opportunity to attend ARMA InfoCon conference or InfoNext or AIM, this is a good connection opportunity in the neighborhood, let's say, and it's a joint chapter opportunity. So hope to see you there. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. So and once again, Steve, thank you so much for all the information that you brought in, and especially for all the questions that you basically brought up, because that means that we have a lot of homework to do to actually figure out, okay, what's going on in our own organization. So what can we bring to our own organization to actually make them think about the human point of view there?
No, thanks for having me. And yeah, I guess it is a session of more of raising questions and providing answers, but I think that's where we are with this.
Mhm.
So thank you. I guess we'll see you next time.